I'd like to introduce Kate Simpson from the Victorian Fisheries Authority, and Kate's going to talk about the recent history of the recreational fisheries management in Victoria. So I'd like everyone to welcome Kate.
Hello everybody. As Craig mentioned, my name is Kate Simpson. I'm a fishery manager with the Victorian Fisheries Authority. I'm one of a team of fishery managers that set the management arrangements for our fisheries here in Victoria. In this role, we do rely really heavily on our science team to provide us with the information that we need to set these management arrangements, as well as all of our recreational fishers and other stakeholders to give us their insights into the social side and the environmental aspects of our fisheries management. So today I will just provide you with a brief overview of the evolution of Dusky management in Victoria, which really didn't start until the 1990s. So in 1995, we got a new Fisheries Act in Victoria, and this is the same legislation that we're operating under today. Following the introduction of this Act, we undertook a review of all of the recreational catch limits for all of our species in Victoria. And it was at this time that it was proposed that Dusky Flathead should have its own bag limit. However, there were concerns around the identification of the different flathead species. As you can see from the picture on the screen, all flathead look really similar. I took this round to the team in the office and asked them what they thought and whether they could identify the different species. And I have it on good authority that we have a sand flathead, a yank flathead, and a dusky flathead. So based on the concerns about the identification of different flathead species and following consultation, a decision was made that we should just have, we should treat all flathead equally and have a single 30 bag limit for all flathead species. The minimum size limit was 25 centimetres, and we limited the number of fish to 2 over the size of 60 centimetres. So following the introduction of these management arrangements, we continued to monitor the fishery, and by the early 2000s it was becoming evident that the targeting of dusky flathead was becoming more popular. As you can see from the graphs, in the 1980s, only around 22% of people in Malakuta were targeting dusky flathead, and by the early 2000s that had almost doubled to 50%. And as mentioned by Bushy earlier, back in the early days, bait fishing was the primary method for targeting dusky flathead. By the early 2000s, we were starting to see a real shift towards the use of lures and soft plastics. And even now, we sent out a survey prior to this conference asking everybody about their fishing experiences. And as you can see in 2018, there are a lot more people now, over 65% of people using lures to target dusky flathead, and with over 75% of those using soft plastics. It was also suggested around the 2000s that there was an increased use of technology and much greater sharing of where people were fishing and how they were fishing for dusky flathead. So all of these changes in recreational fishing practices, from baits to lures, the use of technology, increased sharing of information, significantly increased the catches of dusky flathead. We have data that suggests people were catching up to 80 dusky flathead a day, which was compared to the 10 that they used to be catching before all these sort of changes and evolution of lures and things came into place. At the same time, obviously recreational fishing was becoming a much more popular activity, and Malakuta Inlet and Lake Tyers became recreational fishing havens in the 2000s. So they were, fisheries reserves were set up to enhance recreational fishing for our recreational fishers. And so all of this evidence and information, along with advice from recreational fishers, led to the first dusky flathead management arrangements being introduced in December 2003. And at this time, a fisheries notice was put in place, and we implemented a bag limit of 5 dusky flathead. We kept the size limit the same, but we also limited the amount of fish that you could take over 60 centimetres to just 1. So following the implementation of these management arrangements specifically for dusky flathead, we undertook a range of projects to evaluate how well those management arrangements were working. We also undertook projects to, let people know that we changed the regulations and to make sure that recreational fishers were following those, and also tried to improve our understanding about dusky flathead biology and life history. So 2004, some surveys, recreational fishing surveys, were undertaken in Malakuta, and from those surveys we found that the new bag limits were effective in constraining the amount of fish that was actually amount of dusky flathead that were being caught. So that was a positive sign. But just as importantly at that time, a research project by the Fisheries Research and Development Corporation looked at the survival of flathead post-release. So obviously people were still catching flathead, but there was a lot more release of flathead going on. And from that research, which looked at data from Tasmania, New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland, looking at both sand and dusky flathead, they found that dusky flathead were a really robust species that survived quite well post-survival, with more than 90% of fish surviving. But again, as Wayne mentioned, appropriate handling of the fish is key, I guess, to that post-survival release as well. Another thing that came out of that research was showing that while there had been a shift to lures and the use of lures was making it easier to target flathead, the use of lures was also better for survival of the fish. So the use of lures meant that you got greater survival rates than you did when using baits, and resulting in the deep hooking of fish when using baits. So that was a positive, also a positive result for the dusky flathead. And all of this information basically supported the management arrangements that we'd had in place that were based around the bag limit, a size limit, and catch and release fishing. Another minor change was made to the size limit in 2009 when the fisheries regulations were reviewed, and the minimum size was increased to 27 centimetres for all flathead species. That wasn't the end of management changes for dusky flathead. There was still quite a lot of concern from recreational anglers around the large females, who are the most important egg producers. As Paul mentioned in his talk, you can get one 80 centimetre fish that produces just as many eggs as 12 35 centimetre fish. So protecting those large breeding females was an important consideration for everyone. So together with the concerns from the recreational fishers, we also collected data from creel surveys that were showing that catch rates of larger flathead were decreasing. And there was also some new research that came out on the reproductive biology in New South Wales. So all of these pieces of information we brought together and went out and undertook a whole range of consultation with people. We came out to Lake Tyers, Malakuta, Lakes Entrance, just to talk about the different options for how best to manage dusky flathead into the future. And this is where the idea of the slot limit came from. So in 2012, we introduced a slot limit that limited the take of dusky flathead between 30 centimetres and 55 centimetres. The bag limit of 5 remained unchanged, and these new regulations were introduced via Fisheries notice, and by having an upper size limit of 55 centimetres, we were providing protection for the breeding stock above this size. And the minimum size limit was really based on recreational fisher perception and the view that 27 centimetres was too small a fish to take home and eat. So it was a social decision to change that to 30 centimetres. And so that's where we are today. In 2017, the regulations were updated again to include these into the fisheries regulations, and we have the daily bag limit of 5, minimum size limit of 30 centimetres, and the maximum size of 55 centimetres are the most conservative management arrangements for dusky flathead in Australia. And so next you'll be hearing from Paul and Simon again. They will be telling you about the status of dusky population stocks in East Victorian estuaries, and hopefully they'll be providing us with some evidence to support the effectiveness of this slot limit. Thank you.